Hey, what's going on everybody? In this brand new video series, we are going to finally talk about how to create our own custom backend solution to support a browser frontend as well as an iOS application on the mobile side. The main piece of technology that we'll be using to create all this is Node.js. And before I get into any type of code, I would like to now demo what our application does and slowly talk about what features we're going to support. Okay, so hopefully you are excited about this. Let me switch over to my desktop right now. On the left side of the screen, we have the Chrome browser on the login page right now. And also for the iOS app in the middle, we have the same login screen. In addition to logging in, we can also create a user. So sign up here and let's see, go to register. You'll see the same page. And I'm going to log in using the browser side. Let's see, what's an interesting character for us? Let's say the president and president@gmail.com. 123 for our secret password, submit, and now we are logged in as the president. So pretty basic stuff. This application is called My Journal, and you're basically supposed to just create a lot of different posts for your journal. You can treat it as some kind of diary. I know a lot of us still keep our personal diaries around. I know I do at least. On the right side, you can log in as this brand new user now. So let me go back to the login, and the username is the president and 123 login. And both right now say that I currently don't have any posts, right? So why don't we go ahead and create one using, let's use the browser side, create post. Now for a particular post, you have the title, the body of this post here, and then also some kind of image URL. So why don't I say title is making history as Donald Trump visiting North Korea as the first president. So he's making history. And for the image URL, we can search or maybe steal an image on the internet. So let's say Trump and North Korea. I think I should be able to pull out some kind of image here. So what's going on? Let's take this one right here. It might be good. Let's right click that, copy image address, and I'm going to paste that in here. So submit this. And basically when I hit that submit button, it is going to hit the server at localhost 1338, and it's going to save this post inside of the database. Now this means a couple of things really. Because we have a REST API supported through our custom backend solution, I am going to show you what the REST API looks like right now. So I'm going to open a new tab, paste that in, and just say post like that. And hopefully it should show up. So let me just remove that backslash. And here is our post REST API. So what I can also do is I'm going to create another post, so A, B, C, and D, E, F, hit the submit. And now we have a second post object. You'll see that the REST API, if I hit refresh, we now have two different post objects. Okay, so that is looking pretty fantastic. I'm going to now refresh my iOS side by just dragging down, and you'll see that because the iOS application is consuming the REST API data right here, it's going to pretty much reflect the exact same list of posts that we have inside of the browser. So ABC, and also the Trump posts all the way at the very bottom. Okay, everything is looking pretty good in terms of creating a post object, right? But whenever you have some kind of REST API, you should also support a couple of different features. The other feature is to delete your post objects. So let's say I don't want to see this ABC post around anymore. I can hit the delete here, and delete is going to remove that from the database. And because it's now removed, if I refresh here, this post object will now be gone. All right, so that's looking pretty nice. Now, the other REST API functionality is maybe you want to edit this post object, and perhaps I don't like this title of making history. So I'm going to open it inside of the iOS app, and let's say making history as Donald Trump. And why don't we just change this to creating history, right? I'm going to hit the save button right here, and you see it's now being saved as creating history, and this will now change as creating history as well. So refresh that, and so now the title is changed correctly. Okay, so that's pretty much the application in a nutshell. You can also create post objects inside of the iOS application. So AAA, and let's say BBB. hit the create, the post will be on the very top of the list now. And if you refresh this screen right here, you'll see the exact same thing. This application supports a lot of different users. So if you have another user created, which I did so at the very beginning of today's video, what you can do is log in as different users and you'll see different post objects just like so. And let me just do this on the right side as well. So click on that and you see the exact same thing again, because everything is looking at the same database, namely localhost 1338. All right, so that was obviously a very quick demo of our application here. And you probably have a ton of different questions that you want to ask. Instead of answering your questions one at a time, because that's going to take forever, why don't I slowly walk you through the process of creating this entire application, and hopefully along the way your questions will be answered. So the first thing we need to do is to get started with installing something called SailsMVC that will help us create the foundation of our Node.js backend. So why don't we get started right now? And so before we begin today's coding session, I just wanted to let everybody know that we have a brand new course now available on the website. This course is called Fullstack Social. We have Node.js for the backend. We have iOS Swift for the mobile application right here. And then on the left side, we have HTML and JavaScript for the browser front end. I would like to now give you a very quick demo of the application. I have a user already registered, so I'm going to log in as Hiker and submit right here. You see that whenever I log into the application, we have the friends section on the left. I'm currently not following anyone, and I have previously created some posts. And that's why we have a feed that looks like this. So it looks pretty solid right now. Let me go ahead and log into the exact same user for the iOS application right here. So login is going to load pretty much the same looking UI. We have the Hiker, and then we have the entire feed inside of this vertical list right there. Okay, so pretty awesome so far. And let's say I want to actually follow some friends and fill out this list on the left side. I'm going to hit the search right here. And let's say I want to follow the curry user, and I'm going to go back home. You'll see that I now have my feed populated with the posts related to the curry user right here. So a couple of posts, and down below, I'm back to my Hiker post. If I refresh this right side, you'll see that I have a post objects on the bottom as well as the friends on the top right. So if I wanted to follow more users, I can click on that, click on the gardener, click on the doggy lever, and drag this down, refresh my list right here. You'll see some additional posts show up just like that. All right, so that's just a very quick demo of the application. If you want to check out more details about it, make sure to use the link in the description below. And let's go ahead and get started with the coding session right now. All righty, everybody. Welcome back to the coding session for today's lesson. Hopefully you're ready to get your hands a little bit dirty with some code in today's lesson. What you're seeing on the left side of the screen here is a brief outline as to how exactly I want to teach you to build out this entire application. There are a lot of moving parts, so this is going to take a couple of different lessons here. Hopefully you're not too intimidated by all of these steps. First thing we want to take care of in today's video is a brief intro to what exactly is SailsMVC. And we're going to be using SailsMVC to generate an empty Node.js application. It's pretty easy. I'll show you how to do that step by step. Once we have that done, I'll show you how to install some tools to help us improve the development lifecycle. So you know, things like not having to restart our application every time. And then once we get everything up and running, we are going to create some routes and some endpoints to load some REST API data. And if we get around to creating some CRUD endpoints, we'll do that as well. We'll see what we accomplished in today's video as we move along here. Okay, now that you know what the actual steps are for today's video, let's move this guy to the corner here. And first thing we'll have to talk about is what the hell is SailsMVC? Well, let me go over here, launch a Chrome tab. I hope you guys are aware of how Chrome search works. Basically, salesjs.com, Sales 1.0 has arrived. Check out the upgrade guide here and get started. Down here, they give you a pretty quick description as to what the heck is sales and what it's able to do. It's a really nice framework, I find, especially for newcomers that haven't exactly built out a complex backend solution before. It's 100% JavaScript. It supports any type of database using some kind of ORM, auto-generated REST APIs, and so on and so forth. So make sure to give it a look, and you should be all right. So let's go ahead and get started with our application. Down here, it says we are ready to set sail. I really like the icons and the documentation page. That's kind of what drew me to the SailsMVC. Down here, needs no node problem. Find my node installer. So you can click on here and install node for your computer. Most of you guys probably have it already, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that step. Next thing you want to do here is to install Sales. So make sure to go over here, copy this entire command, and load up a brand new little tab here inside of your terminal. Hopefully you guys can see exactly what's on my desktop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that command there. So npm install sales-g for global. You might run into this error as well. So just type in sudo and then just type in your password right here and install it as the administrator. I think that's what this is called in Unix. And once you have it installed, you should be good to go here. So clear off that. And now what you want to do is you want to head into some kind of directory. So let's go ahead and say sandbox, so sales and sandbox right here, ls. You'll see that this directory right here is completely empty. ls is just listing out the contents of your folder. Okay, so far so good. Let me move this to the corner here. And hopefully things are still looking all right. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to say sales generate and new application. Let's call this the my_journal_lbta and just hit enter right here. Now, next thing you are presented with is a couple of different options. Down here, you can create a web app, which is an extensible project with auth, login, and password recovery all built in out of the box already. I find that this project comes with way too many files, and it's pretty overwhelming if you don't know what's going on. So instead of being overwhelmed and scared by the web app, let's go ahead and create the simple empty project. And let's see, installing dependencies, an empty sales app yours to configure. And just wait for this guy to finish here, and we should be ready to go here. So ls, we have my journal lbta. And the next thing I want to do is I'm going to open this project inside of Xcode, or not Xcode, but Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code, open this guy, open up a new window right here, open some kind of folder. Make sure to go inside of the Let's Build an App sandbox, open up this guy, open it. And somewhere inside of your computer, you should have that folder. And let me just drag this so that you can see what exactly is inside of this window here. Okay, so are things looking okay? Looks good. If you go inside of this project directory, you'll see a ton of directories that are kind of empty. So API controllers. You can also see this if you go inside of here and open dot. This is going to open up the Finder, and you see all of these folders right here. So obviously there are a ton of different things that you have to be aware of for this entire application to work correctly. But the good thing about SailsMVC is that everything is hooked up already. So you're kind of good to go. I'm going to go back into my project and show you the first thing we want to take care of here, which is to launch our application so that it actually works, right? So the main application is loaded inside of this app.js file. There's a lot going on here, but you don't have to care about it too much. The only thing you have to execute is inside of the terminal. So I'm going to use the terminal for Visual Studio Code because it's easier to record. I have this terminal launched right here. You might have to install it using this terminal plugin. But once you have that installed, you can just say, let's see, what is it? Node app.js. And once you have that being run, you can see that your application is loaded on port 1337 by default. And some of you guys might be asking, well, what the heck does that mean? Well, you can go inside of your browser now and say localhost 1337, and you are shown the brand new application that has been just created with the sales generate command. And you can read what it says right here and get your bearings, lift your app, and dive in. So things are looking pretty solid, and we have our application now created. So what else do we want to take care of before we get going here? Well, we can either install some tools or talk about some routes here. So let me first talk about the routes and then show you why we install these little tools to improve development. And let's see, the first thing I kind of want to do here is to make sure I can support some kind of route. And what do I mean by a route? Well, let's say I want to support the route of posts like this. And instead of using returning a 404, I want to show some kind of JSON result. So for example, inside of this Firefox browser, I am inside of this particular URL here, so post, and I want to load some kind of JSON data right here, right? So this is what it looks like in the Firefox browser. And so how do I do that inside of this project currently? Well, it's actually pretty easy, and let me just close out of the outline here. Inside of SailsMVC, they have this config portion. Inside of config, there is a routes.js file. Currently, there only exists one route, which loads the homepage. That's why you see this right here. This is the homepage at the root route, like so. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a second route, I guess is what it's called. And this guy will be called the post route, and hit the colon like that. This guy, I am going to use a quote, and I'm going to say post controller, and let's say post like so. Now this post controller is a file that you have to create inside of the controllers directory here. And then inside of that file, I'm going to create a post endpoint, I guess I'll call it. So you can say new file and make sure to create this guy right here. So let me just copy that, new file. Visual Studio Code is really fast compared to Xcode. So that's kind of why I like it. Make sure to end it off in .js. Now, you might have to get a little bit, used to JavaScript syntax, but it's pretty simple. Just declare inside of your post controller a module.exports, and inside of this dictionary, so this is kind of a dictionary object here, you want to declare your endpoint of posts and just say colon, and this will be a function object right here that takes in a request and a response. Now, the only thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to say response.send, and I'm going to send a string. Here we are hitting the post. So post, let's see, the /post endpoint is probably more accurate here. Okay, so that looks good. And I'm going to hit save and Command Option S to save all my files. And once we do that, we can go back down here, hit Control C to end our application, hit up for Node app.js, and it's going to restart our app now. Hit refresh, we still have our home page. And in addition to the home page, we have our post route, hopefully working just like that. So as you can see, it's really easy to hook up a custom route by providing it inside of the routes.js file. And then you have to kind of create your controller file with post controller and make sure it's named correctly. This post right here is just pointing towards this object there. You don't have to have these two strings match. It can be whatever you want as long as this post exists on this object here. Okay, so that's how everything works. And one thing that's really annoying about the default project is that every time you save your file right here, let's say I modify this to 123 and something like that, right? I want to hit save and I want to refresh here. I want to see this change immediately. So it's really hard to just say, Control C, hit up, and then watch for it and refresh. This process is a little tedious, right? You don't exactly want to do this over and over again. So the way to get around this is to install something called, I for install, global, and node mon. And this is going to install this global tool called nodemon, which watches the files inside of your project. Anytime something is changed, it's going to automatically refresh your code. So just type nodemon like that. It's going to launch your app.js file. So let's say AAA. I'm going to hit save. It's going to restart the app down here, refresh, and AAA is here. At BBB, hit save and just wait, refresh. And now you don't have to manually restart your application, which is a very, very good thing. Okay, now that we have the one tool installed there, something else that is also very useful is this thing called Morgan. So I'm not exactly sure why it's called Morgan, but you want to install this thing called Sales Hook Morgan, and just do this right here. This should be fine. So I'm going to copy that to clipboard, Control C, and npm install Sales Hook and Morgan. So you might want to save this dependency as well. I think it's -s like that. And once you save it, you should be good to go here. So let's say node mod one more time. So what the heck does Morgan do for us, right? Well, Morgan allows us to just refresh this right here. And you see, it tells us exactly which endpoint we're hitting. It says that we are hitting the post endpoint. It's a 304 response because the response is actually cached. And then we have how long it takes to actually return us that response at 2 milliseconds, which is really, really quick. If you say 123 right here, you can see that 123 is a 404, and that pretty much means page not found. Okay, those are the two things that we want to have installed so that we don't have to go crazy, developing our application here. All right, next thing we want to take care of is maybe we want to create a particular endpoint that will return us some JSON data. So kind of similar to what you saw earlier for the post endpoint. So in other words, we are going to modify this code here. So let me go back to the post right there. And let's say I want to return some kind of post object. So const post1 equals some kind of post object. Let's give this an ID of 1 and title and, post title. So title 1 and maybe some kind of body text as well. And here is my body. Do with it what you want. All right, so that's a couple of properties for this post1 object. You can just send this right here, save, refresh, and wait for it to refresh. And let's see, ID1, and these are all the properties that you specify right here. Pretty straightforward. I don't think I need to explain too much in detail as to what's going on. And now you can do the same thing with maybe a second post. Say I'm going to create one right here. Let's say make sure the indentation is correct. And this guy, let's modify this to be the ID of, let's say 2. And here is title 2. And let's say body. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make sure to declare that as post1, so post1 and post2. And now instead of just returning just one single dictionary, we now have the array format with ID1 and ID2. So basically 2 post objects. Okay, as you can see, JSON format is native to JavaScript. So being able to return everything in JSON is just simply as returning these dictionary objects. So this is kind of one of the reasons why I like JSON and Node.js as my backend. It makes things really easy. And there are also a lot of other benefits to this framework as well. So one other thing that we want to take care of is maybe we want to talk about something called a slug. So slugs are nice and juicy. And what exactly is a slug here? Well, let's pretend that we have these objects saved in some kind of dummy database, right? How exactly can we fetch a particular post object by the ID of, let's say, 1 or 2? Well, the way I'm going to do this is to introduce another concept called a slug, and I'm going to declare a second route or a second endpoint right here called find by ID, and the slug is going to be the post ID like that. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is for this route, I'm going to make sure we are going to hit the post controller dot find by ID. Now, this is a new route that I have to introduce inside of post controller. So hit a comma here, and this new route, just paste that find by ID. Again, everything is kind of a function that takes in a request and a result like so. And now that I have this declared, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the post ID from the slug. So what exactly does that mean? Well, I'm going to say const post ID. This object is equal to the request.param. I'm going to grab the post ID slug right here. And now what I'll do is I'm going to say response.send me some kind of string. And I'm going to show this inside the browser. So let's say ABC. Let me just save that. And I'm going to use find by ID here. So let's say find by ID. Let's see what this does. Find by ID does nothing until you specify the actual post ID. So /1, and that should be okay. I actually need to hit Command Control or Command Option and S to save the routes right here. And now everything is saved correctly. Let me refresh this. And now find by ID is sending back ABC like so. Instead of sending back ABC, why don't we send back the post ID that we specify? So grab that, paste that in here, save, wait for the refresh, and let's see, refresh right here. You see the 1, you see right here the 2, and you see, whatever you type in as the last slug ID. So whatever that is, you'll be printed out right here in the browser because we're sending back the actual post ID as the response object. Okay. Hopefully this is pretty straightforward so far. I think JavaScript is really, really nice because you can type out the code really quickly. Only if you know what you're doing. Okay, last thing I want to do is, let's say for find by ID, we don't want to just return the ID, right? Let's say this guy right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create some kind of dummy database. So here is my dummy database, and let me just paste that code in here. And I'm going to declare an array. So all posts equals post 1 and post 2 like that. And maybe you want to introduce a third post. I don't know, it's really up to you. So right here, let's see, let's call this post 3, just to make this a little bit more interesting. Post 3 and body 3 like that. Okay, so now we have 3 post objects inside of this array here. And what I can do is, I'm going to, for the post endpoint, I want to return all of the post objects like that. So let's modify here, and we can say save. And for this, we are going to say back, back, back. And here we go. So refresh the post. We got 1, 2, and 3 inside of the post array. For the find by ID, what I'm going to do is, whenever I am trying to find by the particular post ID right here, I'm simply going to filter down this all post array. And I guess this is somewhat of a tricky algorithm if you're not used to writing algorithms yourself. So let's see, filtered posts. I'm going to filter the all post array and filter it down on some kind of function here. So you can write these functions in JavaScript in a really, really short syntax, which might look a little bit confusing. But I'm going to declare P as one of my post objects inside of the post array. And then for each one of these guys, I'm going to return P.id equals, let's see, what do I want to do here? The post ID like that. So this is just a filter function. It's very similar to, I think, Swift syntax. So you should be aware of what's going on here. So let me just hit enter here. And last thing I'll do is I'm going to check the length, filter post.length. If this is greater than 0, that means we actually found the post. So let's say res.send filtered post and 0 like that. If this is not true, then that means we haven't found the post, I believe. So send failed, so failed to find post by ID. Let's see, print out the post ID as well. Let's remove this last statement here. And I think we should be okay. So let's find by ID. Let's try to find by ID 3. So find by ID of 3, and we get the ID 3, title 3, and body 3. We should have the similar response of find by ID of 1 gives us this particular object right here. And let's see what happens if we try to find by something that doesn't exist, right? So ABC, we don't have that ID inside of our post. That means that we enter this case right here of line 30. Response, send failed to find post by ID of ABC. Alrighty, everybody. Everything with our application is looking pretty good so far. Last couple of things I want to take care of before I let you go is perhaps I'll declare a creation endpoint for our post objects as well. So declare this as a function and request and response, just like so. Make sure to end this with a comma like that. Now, before I fill out the definition here, one thing that I might want to resolve about this little bit of code is, you see how we're filtering the all post function right here? You might be a little bit confused as to what this is doing. Another way to write out this bit of code is to say const filtered post equals all posts. And let me write this out in longhand format. So it's filter, I believe it's function like this, and P brace return P equals, let's see, post ID like that. I think it's actually P.id like so. So you can either write it in shorthand format like this or use the longhand, which is this. Both are okay. I don't really have a preference. I think this looks a little bit easier to read, actually, in my opinion. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's fill out our creation endpoint right now. So for example, whenever I hit this creation endpoint, I want to append onto the all posts array. And what exactly do I mean? Well, I want to say all posts or append of some kind, right? So append in JavaScript is called push. Don't ask me why that is, but that's just the way the syntax is declared. What I'll do is I'm going to say const and new post equals an object of ID, let's say 4, title, new post, and let's say body and new body. All right, I know we all like new bodies. New post will now be pushed onto the all post array, just like so. Okay, final thing we need to do is to make sure that we hook up our create endpoint inside of the routes page. So the routes is right here. And let's see, let's declare this as the create endpoint, just like so. And let's say colon, and this will be the post controller dot create. Okay, so now I'm going to hit Control Option S to make sure that everything is saved. And the way I can tell that things are saved is that there's a circle dot if it's not. So everything looks pretty good right now. Let me refresh this right here. You can see that we are trying to find the ABC by ID. Instead of using find by ID, why don't we use the create instead? So hit the create, and now it's kind of spinning. The reason why it is not ending the request is because inside of the create right here, we need to say something like res.send or just res.end. Either one is okay. Let me just end the request off like that. Hit the refresh here, and the request has now been ended with this extra line of code. All right, so not so bad. And the thing that we need to check is whether or not the creation was actually successful. And so what I'll do is I'm going to hit the post endpoint to list out all my post objects inside of this array. So let's see what that looks like right now. So post, and you can see we have our 4th post object right here. If I hit the create endpoint yet again, we are going to go back and hit the post refresh. You'll see that we have the exact same post being created inside of our post array like so. Now, one thing that you do have to be very, very cognizant about here is that every time you save your application and it restarts, you want to hit this post endpoint again, and you'll see that you'll only have your post ID 1, 2, and 3 because the entire application gets restarted, and this code right here gets executed again to create your all post array. So make sure you are aware of that fact there. Last thing we might want to do is for the creation process, right? We don't want to have this hard-coded title and body data like this. And instead, maybe you want to create it using some URL parameters here. So let's say the title is declared as, some title, and you can say and body equals some body. So if you try to hit the URL down here, you'll see that we're hitting create title and some body. And instead of using this dummy data here, I'm going to grab it from the URL using const and say title equals request.param. And we'll use title like that. So very similar to the slug concept. So body equals request.param. And let's say body like that. All right, now we can use the body here, and let's say body. And this will be the title, or title and body rather. Okay, so I'm gonna hit save now. And instead of running this, why don't we say console.log and title and plus space and plus body like that. And now I'm going to refresh this right here. You'll see that we have some title and some body. And if I go back and list out the post, refresh, you'll see that we have ID 4 of title of some title, and the body says the actual parameter that we pass into the actual URL. So that's how you make your create endpoint work. And this guy really should be a post request instead, but I think I'll get to that in the next video. The last thing I want to say about this console log is that for the SailsMVC framework, there's actually a different way of logging things. So when you're logging something like this, it just says it in this pure text like that. Instead of using this, you might want to use sales.log.debug. So you can use debug and use the exact same thing here. So let me show you what the difference is. So paste that in here and save. Let me now hit the create API again. So create and hit that. So hit that. You see that at the very beginning here, we have the debug, and then it says the title and body. You can, I believe, use warn as well. So warning gives a different type of message. So like that, you see the warn is yellow. The reason why you do this is because, I guess, first of all, the actual warning statement right here is in yellow, makes it a little bit easier to visually parse out when you're just looking at the log like that. The other reason why you might want to do this is because when you launch your application into a production environment, you might want to just disable all the debug statements, and you might only want to see the warning statements. So this guy right here allows you to toggle your debug statements very, very easily. Alrighty, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. The video is getting a little bit long here, so I'm just going to end with a couple of closing comments. So in this lesson, as you can see, we were very easily able to create a blank, empty Node.js application using the SailsMVC framework. And you also saw how easy it is to set up some routes to return some JSON data inside of the browser. Now, one thing that I do have to say is that all of the routes that we just wrote out, it's really just dealing with dummy data that isn't all that interesting, right? So in the next lesson, we'll learn about how to persist our data into a real database, and then how to fetch, delete, and update this data with some other endpoints that we'll create inside of our controller file. Now, if you're interested in learning about how to create a complete full stack social media application using SailsMVC, make sure to check out the course using the link in the description below. That's going to be it for today. Hopefully I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye bye, guys.